When I think of the term reinvention, I think of finally finishing and executing on what you've been dying to do, that whisper that you hear that tugs at your soul, or maybe a little bit deeper. It's about finally arriving at you and letting go of all the stuff that you've been trying to do that's not really you and inauthentic.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to Lux Media Studios. Hello and welcome. You've landed on Zero Limits Living. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. Every week I bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. This show is now so popular you can see it or hear it on 1,000 platforms across the galaxy, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, YouTube, and probably anything you can name and anything you're using right now. To make it easy for you, I'm putting all of the episodes, hundreds of them, in one place. Go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com, ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. You can binge. You can go there and sign up to be notified whenever there is a new episode as well. Also, people ask me about coaching. I started my own coaching program 20 years ago. It's been proven. It's been tested. It is a system that I trademarked about 15 years ago. If you're curious, if you want to know what's working for other people, go and check out, no charge, no obligation, Miracles Coaching at miraclescoaching.com, miraclescoaching.com. My latest program is mentaltimetravelsystem.com. Mental time travel system. You can go to your past. You can actually reinterpret it, free the energy that was stuck from it, get all of that gathered into this moment, and out of the present empowerment, you can create a whole new future. Mental time travel system. My latest book at the moment is called Unexpected Kindness, but I'll tell you a secret. I have another book coming out. I know it's no surprise to anybody who follows my career. I've written 90 books. The latest book is Unexpected Kindness, but the next book is called Zero Limits Living. Zero Limits Living, and that'll be out in July. Believe me, I'll tell you about it as we get closer to it. So today we want to talk about being an entrepreneur, making a difference, doing what you love, making money from it. And I have a man who is an expert in all of this. He's gone through some rough nights. He's come out the other side, and he's helping a whole lot of people. I've actually been a guest on his show twice, and to get even, I thought I'd get him on this show. He is the author of this book called The Reinvention Formula, The Reinvention Formula. I just got it from Amazon. And it's how to unlock a bulletproof mindset to upgrade your life. Now, who doesn't want that? This is by Craig Siegel, and I have the man here. How are you?
My goodness. So that's what it feels like to be on the other end of an epic introduction.
I'm just getting started. I'm just getting started. You know, the first time I was on your show, you know, the very first question you asked me?
What is your superpower?
Yeah. What is your superpower?
Payback time.
Right.
This is so good. First of all, I'm so grateful to be here. I love every time we connect and so forth. In regards to superpowers, I think we all have them. I think we all have a couple. I think one of mine is determination. I know it's probably not the sexiest answer. The ironic part is I think stuff like consistency and grit and determination probably don't sound like super clever. And the reality is they're available and accessible to everybody. A lot of people don't tap into that. I'm determined, whether it's running the marathons or making a difference with what we're doing now or delivering the best conversation I've ever had in my life with you right now. I'm determined. I'd say that's one of my superpowers.
You know, I wouldn't underestimate that because that is a secret to success. And it may sound like, well, we've all heard that before, but how many of us are actually enforcing it? How many of us are actually living it? How many of us are actually benefiting from following through? I've told people that one of my secrets to success, and I didn't think of this when you asked me the question, what my superpower was. At the time, I just kind of ad-libbed something and stumbled around in a clumsy way. But persistence would be one. Because I was persistent during homeless and poverty, all of that, and continue even today at age 70. I'm persistent. I'm going for what I want. I get up every day and go in that direction.
Yeah.
I love your book, The Reinvention Formula. How have you reinvented yourself?
Yeah. So this is a good story. So prior
Mm.
to the pandemic, I had a totally different life. I was on Wall Street for 13 years and I was making money and I was successful. And I put in quotations because I created this persona. I was following in the footsteps of other people's expectations. I don't even know whose expectations. I was inauthentic, but I had my own business and I was making money and I was in relationships that weren't really in alignment. But I was so stuck, or I felt stuck, I should say. I was so invested into this narrative, I didn't realize that I had a choice. And then a few things happened at once right before the pandemic. I just got out of a toxic relationship, which is never fun. My best friend, my dad, had just gotten diagnosed with cancer. He's still battling. And even though I had my own business, it wasn't exactly like my soul was being lit up. In fact, on the contrary, every day I went to work, my soul was contracting. It wasn't expanding. And so essentially, I was dying a slow death. And then I started running all these marathons right in between the pandemic and this moment. And that was interesting because I'd never been a runner. In fact, you couldn't pay me to run a few years back.
Is that right? I didn't
That's
know
right.
that.
And now, interestingly enough, I'm paying to run marathons. But it wasn't about the marathon 26.2 miles. It was about the transformation. And all of a sudden, I started getting purpose at a season when I was really looking for something. But I showed myself that I could be successful at something I didn't necessarily have experience in. And then fast forward the pandemic, I mean, talk about a global awakening. I looked at this as an historic opportunity to just reassess, to reinvent myself. And for the first time ever, Dr. Joe, I got really, really, really quiet. And I blocked out the BS and the noise and the interference. And I just connected. Look, if you want to go higher, you got to go deeper. And I really just surrendered and connected to God. And I started being able to draw upon divine inspiration. And I was able to get these ideas and it all came to me. I had a bit of awakening. It was like, of course, I had been obsessed with personal development for years, reading your stuff, NLP, law of attraction, a bunch of other things. I just didn't think I was worthy of turning that into a career until I realized this is much more than just a passion. This is my assignment. Put together a whole strategy and a vision, kind of created what I like to call my 10-lane highway, each lane representing a different way to make an income and obviously, most importantly, make an impact. Coaching, speaking, book deal, podcast, TED Talk, all the things. And then I reverse engineered and I said, can I really do this? That's when the ego or the opponent hopped in and he was persistent. And then I said, you know what? The cost of inaction, I like to call the COI, was way too high. I would have actually rather died than chosen to go back and be miserable. And so from the fear of stepping into the unknown, quickly transformed into excitement. I leaned in, and for the first time in my life, I was in alignment. And as a wise man once said, success loves speed. And so I leaned, that wise man was you. And I leaned in, and over the last 3 years, I say very humbly, the brand's exploded. I'm finally in alignment, having so much fun, making more money than I ever made. Got engaged, a brand new puppy who I'm hoping you won't hear during this interview, and all the things. And so that's maybe a little context for your listeners on how I reinvented myself.
That is a fantastic story. Thank you so much for breaking it down and sharing it. Also, I'm impressed. You did all this in 3 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when I say all this, you're talking about your podcast, which I've been on twice, correct?
Yeah.
You're talking about your book, which I just held up. All of these things came out of nowhere. You didn't have them before 3 years ago.
No, nothing.
Wow.
I didn't even have an idea then.
You got to break this down. You know, what my job is to help these people that are tuning in and watching us. And maybe they're jealous of both of us. They're going, oh, this is easy for Dr. Joe. This is easy for you. 3 years, divine blessing. You know, the skies opened up. God talked to you. You got an assignment. And now it's all easy for you.
Yeah.
What about the people that are watching who are going, they're disconnecting because they're feeling they're unhappy. And maybe they're not on Wall Street like you were, but they're at a job or lack of a job, and they're fumbling around. They're just feeling inadequate, and they're uncertain, and they're confused. What would be your advice to kind of pick up, not follow exactly what you did or I did, but where would you help them? Where would you give them a helping hand or a helping tip?
Yeah, this is the good stuff. I thought you'd never read. So this is the deep stuff. And first and foremost, let's let go of trying to be something we're not. And a lot of people talk about what we need to add for success. I like to talk about what can we let go of? And number one, waiting for the perfect time and trying to be something that we're not. And I've been inauthentic for so long. And when I was going to reinvent myself, and I want to say this, I think people hear the word reinvention and it could be a bit intimidating, right?
Mhm.
Some people are 70, 80, 90 years old. Some people are 40, whatever the case may be. But I just want to be clear. To me, reinvention is not starting over. You're never really starting over because you're taking the lessons and experiences with you. But when I think of the term reinvention, I think of finally finishing and executing on what you've been dying to do, that whisper that you hear that tugs at your soul, or maybe
Oh,
a little bit deeper. It's about finally arriving at you and letting go of all the stuff that you've been trying to do that's not really you and inauthentic and so forth. And so for anyone out there that's looking at us and like easier for you to say, I would say this, let's start connecting to a spiritual reality that really makes up 99% of what's going on here. I mean, the 1% of, Dr. Joe and I talking, this coffee mug, obviously the physical appearances, Dr. Joe is much more handsome than mine. All this stuff is just 1% of what's actually happening here. And you teach this all the time. And so if we could just start to look beyond our logic and tap into something a little bit greater, then all of a sudden, as we continue to connect, we're more available for those downloads, for the great ideas, to reveal more light. And there are tools within the systems that you can practice and that you can utilize to connect and go a little bit deeper. And as you begin to go down that path, that's when things begin to open up for us.
well spoken. Thank you very much. Having your own show for so many years has made you a very polished speaker.
Thank you,
You,
Dr. Joe.
you've got the articulation down very well, and you know what the answers are. All right, I got to push a little bit because I'm trying to help as many people as I can, and I'm representing the devil in some respects.
I understand.
Obviously, I'm on the same page with you. Obviously, I talk about downloads. Obviously, I talk about the spiritual side of life. I think that's where we're supposed to connect. But what about the people who say, I don't know what the spiritual is? I can't connect to the spiritual. I keep thinking of Gene Simmons of KISS, who said he's never been spiritual because nobody's ever explained it to him in a way that made sense. He's waiting for somebody to give him the example or the illustration or the definition where he can go, oh, now I know what you're talking about. Otherwise, his great God, not to put him down, this is what he is saying himself, is money. That's his
Yeah.
spirituality. It's the cash. So how do you define this so that people can relate to it in the way that you and I are now living?
Yeah. So we're going to go real deep below now, which is
Okay.
what that you love. This deep spiritual wisdom that we're speaking of, it existed thousands of years ago. This is the spiritual blueprint for the human soul. And just like for anyone that's watching right now, there's a window behind me in New York City. If someone were to jump out, even if they were a great person, they would go down due to gravity. Those are just universal laws. The spiritual laws in which Dr. Joe and I are talking about are very, 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 very real. And I want to say this, after you listen to this conversation, we encourage you to test it out. Just don't take our word for it. But the laws of the universe are extremely real. And we're all here to utilize the gifts that were given to us and be that channel so that we can express them and help other people reveal their own light. And when I say the word light, I mean like abundance or fulfillment and all that good stuff. And when we utilize the channel and with no agenda, share, not need for recognition, any of that stuff, and help other people, then in return, we reveal our own light. And as a result, we're more available for that one thought, that one idea, that phone call that comes in, that the client that reaches out to you, the money, all the stuff. There's a system, and we have opportunities to tap into that. And look, if you're still not convinced, I would just say this. Think about how some of the things work in regards to the universe. You ever been like tapped into a different frequency and you're just on fire and things are happening for you? And then there's other times where you're in a lowered state and all of a sudden, like you're looking up at all your problems. It's very similar. Everything is energy, but it comes from source. And we want to connect with that. And the deeper we go with that, the more available we are to reveal our own light. And the best thing to do is to legitimately test this stuff out. And I just want to say this. You talk about persistence. The biggest opponent that we're going to have is, in fact, the opponent in our head, the ego. I know you recently read a book that you recommended in my community, Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill. Whether it's the ego, the devil, the opponent, whatever you want to call them, that never-ending persistent voice in our head is real and it's there. Here's the good news. every single time we hear that voice, we have an opportunity to overcome the ego or the opponent by exercising one of our greatest superpowers, which is resistance. Resist temptation. Don't cave. Don't give in to the self-doubt. Or even if something happens, like a challenge or an obstacle or a work problem, if you just pause and don't react, what you'll see is that the seas will begin to part. And then all of a sudden, you'll be able to reveal some magic. Someone will call you with some sort of good news and stuff like that. So these are universal laws. And right here, these are some tools that you can tap into or plug into the system.
I love it. Well said. Well explained there. I also am glad you talked about the ego, because I was surprised and relieved to see one of the ending chapters in your book is titled Ego. And in fact, since I brought it up, what is your take on the ego? So many of us say, you got to kill the ego. And I'm like, good luck trying to do that.
It's impossible.
Yeah. What is your take on the ego? How do you frame it?
I like to refer to him as the opponent. It just feels better to me, but I think it's the same person, if you will, same concept, or the devil, Satan, whatever your thing is. And I believe he was put there by source to give us an opportunity to overcome, right? Because nothing is fulfilled if it's not earned in life, right? So if we have challenges and problems that we have the ability to overcome, now we can earn fulfillment that actually is sustainable and lasts. It's just like instant gratification. You've seen people that, whether it's a lottery winners or someone goes viral on social media, they blow up. It's not sustainable. Either they'll lose it all or they'll find some sort of way to sabotage it. But when we have something that we can earn by overcoming the ego, now we're talking. And I think the ego's job is to have us born with all this potential and have us die with all this potential. He wants us to play small. But every time, every single day that he reappears is an opportunity for us to grow and expand. And I mean our soul. And when we do that by resisting temptation and not giving in to self-doubt, now we have an opportunity to reveal more light.
You know, I'm imagining that having lunch with you when you were on Wall Street and only Wall Street like 3 years ago is probably very different than having lunch with you today.
Oh, yeah. Two totally different people.
Are you still in contact with any of the Wall Street people?
No. And nothing against anybody.
Right.
I've evolved so much, or maybe I should say, let go of who I wasn't, that I just don't have much in common from the supporting characters in my movie then. And so I wish everybody genuinely the best. And I want to see everybody grow and expand and do their thing. But I just don't have as much in common. So for me, I like to be around people that I have a common future with, not necessarily a common past. People like you, where these are the types of conversations, they're just intoxicating to me. I can't get enough of.
Yeah, and I would agree. It's the same kind of thing with me. This is the level of conversation I want to be on, and even transcend that and see where it goes, see what comes in for us. Now, when I'm reading your book, I know a turning point in there was with you and your journal. You were talking about writing a journal, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want you to tell the story. How has keeping a journal and writing a journal ignited the transformation or the reinvention of your own life?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm really big on journaling, and I encourage everybody to lean in. And whether you think it's a woman thing or whatever, I would put your ego aside and just grab the pen and reflect and write down some notes. One of the reasons why I love it so much, it gives me an opportunity to set intentions. And towards the end of every single year, and I was doing this way before I reinvented myself with CLS, even when I was on Wall Street, and it's cool because I still have the journals and I get to look back, I would always set a theme for the upcoming year. And I think that's a good way to manifest things, is by setting the intention. Obviously, divorce from the outcome, but marry the process, do all that you can. But it's good because then you set the tone. And it's interesting when you look back at the end of next year, like, oh, wow, a lot of those things came to fruition, or I went in that direction. But it gives you an opportunity to get clear and to create some direction. And like I said, set your intentions and tone. And I think that's real because it's like a GPS for our life. Not everything's going to go exactly according to plan, but it's good to have direction, right? And then we can kind of figure out the how along the way, as long as we're operating in the right vibration or frequency and so forth. But for me, journaling has always been good to, number one, it's therapeutic, write down some stuff, but also set your intentions. There's something powerful with the brain. And also, I mean, like, physical journal, not like 2024 typing everything, like literally whip out the pen and so forth. And I just think it's really powerful. And every time I suggest it to other people and they lean in, I know they see really powerful results as well.
So let's break that down a little bit. And I want to make sure I understand. So you just said use the journal, but use pen and ink. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, actually take pen to paper physically. I know old school style
Old
these days.
school. Okay. And I'm with you on that because I think that is the hand mind kind of coordination. You're speaking
Yes.
directly to the brain. You're not doing technology and typing. So I get that. The second part I don't always understand because there's so many different ways to do journals. They can be a dream exploration. If you follow Carl Jung, for example, I heard you say intention. So are your journals something where you go, this is what I'm going to achieve? Or do you put it in present time and say, I now own this yacht? Or what are you doing in your journal that is an example to educate us on
Yeah.
how to keep a journal that makes a difference?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think there's something really powerful about doing like a future gratitude exercise, like being thankful for stuff that hasn't happened yet,
Mhm.
because essentially then in a different dimension it has, and time just hasn't caught up yet. Whatever your go-to is, I like to do that. And I also like to just set the theme. So for example, if I'm writing a journal entry December 29th, 2023, going into the new year, I would write down some stuff that I'm looking forward to leaning into and accomplishing over the next year. And then also you can definitely add in some things like I'm so grateful now that blah, 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 that hasn't really happened yet. There's something powerful within that as well. I think either one, pick your poison, do your thing, but absolutely set your intentions, whether you want to be grateful for them now, even if they haven't happened yet, or even just write down things that you're looking to accomplish. At least now there's evidence of it because you actually took the time.
I think when I was growing up and I heard about journals, I thought of them as diaries.
Yeah,
And
same.
so a diary is, you're talking about what happened today and what you're grumbling about or what you like. But what
Yeah.
you're saying in terms of a journal, it's almost like a wish fulfillment or manifestation book. And I'm throwing words out there to see what connects so that I understand and so everybody watching or listening understands. How would you describe it? And I guess the other question is, do you do it every day? Every day, are you writing in it, adding to it, or just rereading it in some way?
I think it's awesome that we're going deep on this. And it's
Yeah.
funny because that's why I said, like, sometimes men, they'll hear the word journal and they're like, yeah, I don't think that's for me. Because I think similar to most people, just like me and you, we had this perception that it was
Yeah.
Dear Diary. Today, the
Yeah.
kids in the cafeteria made fun of me.
Right.
That's not what I mean. You could write it every single day, but I don't, for me personally, if something happened or something that I would like to document or write or put thoughts to paper or a vision board or plan, I would do it. But it's mostly important things, or if I'm creating something specific, like my plans for the new year and so forth. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with writing every single day. It's just that I like to keep it for really, really productive, important things. And also when you're creating a new project, whether it's a vision board or a whiteboard or just putting pen to paper, now you're putting it out there, you're putting the energy out there, and now you're giving life to it. So to clarify, I don't mean Dear Journal or Dear Diary and stuff like that. You could absolutely do it every day. For me, it's probably like a couple times a month type thing. And then a really special one towards the end of the year, dictating the tonality for the following year.
This is priceless. Very helpful to clarify for everybody, including me. And do you keep the journal under lock and key? In other words, does your wife/girlfriend, anybody in your staff, does you publicize it anyway, shape or form, or you got to put it on eBay and sell it at some point? Or you,
Yeah. So
the basic answer is, do you keep it to yourself or do you share it?
yeah, I typically do it for myself, and I'll hold one up right now. I have these old school journals, Dr.
Yeah.
Joe, like
Mhm.
like old notebooks ones. I'm old fashioned. Maybe I'm a bit of an old soul. I have like different colors all over my dining room table, some for different topics for different reasons,
Mm.
and I'll go into them whenever I see fit. It's typically private. I mean, look, sometimes I'll showcase like to someone that I really care about or a mastermind what intentions I set for the following year. But for the most part, this is between me and
Yeah.
source.
Okay. And then going back to what you referenced in your wonderful book, The Reinvention Formula, you were keeping a journal. And was it the journal where you said, hey, I'm going to write a book? Here it is later. I'm going to have my own podcast. And of course, here it is 3 years later. I'm going to run marathons. And here it is. I think you said 20 or something like that. Was that all in a journal?
You know what? Yes. It was. And when I started to really reinvent myself in the beginning of the pandemic, that's when I really got clear and got quiet and got intentional and strategic. And I was writing stuff down and I was setting the intentionality for the next 3 years. And I even did a 3-year story arc on what I'd like to accomplish or what I'd like to go for and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I can't trust it enough, whether it's a journal, a vision board, a mood board, something that is around these days, whatever your thing is. If you don't give energy to it, I don't see how it can come to fruition. So you want to be so intentional with your life. Be open to adapt and pivot, of course, but there's just something so powerful about declaring something or going after something or giving energy to it. And then obviously marry the process, divorce the outcome.
Believing Before Seeing, a new bestseller by Candace Barr. Order your copy today.
And what about the how? So many people get, and you know this, we all do this. I still do it. I have a big dream, big goal, descended on me. And it's like, oh my God, then how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
And the how can stop you. You're writing in your journal, you say you're going to do a book. As far as I know, you didn't do a book before this one. You're going to run marathons. You said you couldn't be paid to run before. You're going to have your own podcast, didn't have one before. What did you do with the how? When you're sitting there going, this is what I want, I don't know how.
Yeah, this is like a 10-figure conversation right here. This is great.
Yeah.
In regards to the how, it's interesting because when I first started CLS, my brand, I was very strategic about how I was going to do certain things. But now, especially over the last year and a half, as I've really gone deeper and connected in my spirituality and so forth, I've realized that you need to know the how a little bit less than you think. As long as you're tapping in and utilizing the rules and the laws of the system and resisting temptation with the ego and being able to reveal more light and to share without an agenda and not need recognition and do the right things, then all of a sudden you're revealing your magic. And all of a sudden someone reaches out to you, you hear good news, it just begins to come together. Or even better, as you really connect, now you're drawing upon divine inspiration and you just have the right idea at the right time, the right decision, the right people to reach out to. And that's not really stuff that you can plan. The best thing that you could do is to go down the path that you and I are really talking about here. And the how kind of becomes presented to you based on my experience over the last year and a half. And I'd love to ask you what you think about that.
I'm totally with you, because as much as I like strategy and thinking strategically, I've had successes in my life I could not have planned. I could not have orchestrated. I could not have used any strategy whatsoever to get there. For example, I was lucky with the internet. I was in the right place at the right time. And my whole ability to write and communicate and reach people was exploded because of something called the internet. I couldn't have planned that. I didn't know it was coming. The same thing with many years later, and I'm writing a book called The Attractor Factor, which is my stepping out in spirituality. And some woman reads it and says she wants to make a movie. I didn't have on the bulletin board or on the poster board or the mood board or even in a journal that I was going to appear in the movie. And of course, the movie was The Secret. I could not have planned it. Oh, but I do know there is a secret to all these things that I think you would agree with this. And that is to say yes, even when you don't have a clue what you're doing. Say yes.
100%.
And I can tell you my own stories about that, but I don't, thinking you know how can actually get in the way of manifesting the very thing you want to create.
That's the juicy nugget right there that I hope everybody grasps, because the universe favors the bold, right?
Yeah.
And the universe will provide opportunities and things will begin to take shape. The chess pieces of the chessboard of life will come into place, but you'll never be able to experience that if you're over analyzing or worrying exactly about the how.
Yeah. This is why sometimes reading books on how to do something aren't really useful, because it's talking about what that author did during his life and her life and their time period and all the pieces that fell into play. You try to reproduce that and you're not going to do it. It reminds me of Mark Twain. In his later years, he had said his way of living worked for him. He drank scotch every night, warm scotch. He had 20 cigars a day. He said, but his approach to living, if you followed it, might assassinate you. You have to find your own way. Now, this question also comes to mind. I don't mean to interrupt you here, but this question is coming to mind about you. You seem very clear. You're very present. You're very clear. You're very wise. You're coming from a lot of experience. I know you've been interviewing people, so you've been gaining from their wisdom. But how are you staying in the pocket? How are you staying in the groove of clarity every day? What's your secret? What are you drinking or eating or meditating on or smoking? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a very powerful question. So my spiritual practices are everything to me. And
Mhm.
one thing that I started doing last year, which has made a huge impact to me, is I became a student. I was taking a course at the Kabbalah Center,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
take what you like, leave the rest. But I'm really into it, and I love the spiritual laws and so forth that I'm learning. And my teacher actually there became my spiritual advisor and so forth. Whether it's that or reading one of your books or doing my own personal development, I
Mhm.
think the key word there is development, right? Everyone knows if you want to run a marathon or do something physically, you got to be physically fit. But what about staying mentally fit? And for me, every single day when I wake up, and I know it's become trendy, like on social media, to talk about your 15-hour morning routine. I think a lot of that is, very unnecessary, but
Mhm.
something that's very important for me every day. And I wake up earlier just to get this in because it's like 2 hours, and I don't want to rush it. Is I do a lot of personal development every single morning so that I could set the tone. And I kind of feel like I'm charging up for the day, especially like, with what we do and you're helping a lot of people and you're coaching and you're speaking, it takes a lot out of you. So you want to make sure that you're charged up. And so each and every single day, whether it's spiritual practice, reading a book, listening to a podcast on YouTube, I'm doing something to learn and expand my soul. And I found that if you stop doing that, just like if you stop eating right or stop working out, you won't be as in good shape. If you stop doing your personal development, your soul will begin to contract because the one thing in the world that your soul resents is contracting. It wants to always expand and grow and learn. And so my spiritual practices and my personal development are non-negotiable for me each and every single day.
And is there something you do on a regular basis? Are you an ice bath person, for example, or are you a gratitude for 20 minutes person, for example? I'm just fishing for a couple of things that might
Yeah.
be universally
Yeah.
unique.
I love gratitude, of course. And for me, I do like, you're not going to find me like sitting in the corner meditating, but I run 5 days a week. The other two, I'll go upstairs and lift weights. But every day on a run, I'm doing my best connecting. It's kind of like a moving meditation to me. But
Mhm.
yeah, I pray and I do gratitude each and every single morning to my personal development. And then I hit the workouts. In regard to a lot of these trendy things like these cocktails and the ice baths, personally, I never got into them, at least not yet. I have my own thing. So no, but whether it's journaling or gratitude or praying or doing some sort of connecting and
Yeah.
charging yourself and being able to be that vessel, right? Or that channel so that we can reveal our light. That's what's most important for me. And that's just non-negotiable.
I love it. I love it. And thank you for being so open and
Of course.
transparent with everything that you're doing. It helps all of us. And I find
Yeah.
it fascinating as well. Now,
What's your morning
also,
routine, if you don't mind me asking?
what's my routine? I'm not getting in an ice bucket, that's for sure. Maybe it's maybe somewhere down the road. I get in a hot tub every night. That's my gratitude time. That is my muscular relaxation. That is my separation from technology. That is very important to me. It's
Yes.
raining outside right now, but I'll probably still go in the hot tub anyway.
Nice.
Uh, a hot tub, there's a reason for it besides all the jokes about it and everything and how I relax in it and I have a cigar in it and all of that. But it's also my time for the silence.
Mm.
And I think that's priceless. So many of us are distracted. We're preoccupied. We're thinking about the past or the future. We're not in the moment at all. And we're not listening to, you've used the word downloads. We're not listening to the messages coming from a higher power. Call it source, call it God, call it the divine, call it whatever you want to call it. But you have to be open to receive. So for me, that hot tub is a lot more than a cigar and relaxing and heat. This is also my time to receive something. And it's also my time to say thank you back to the great something. So that's very important to me. And I kind of do the gratitude as much as I can throughout the day, but I start with it and I end with it. I would say that's an important one. The rest of it is I'm very much into meditation. I'm very much into nebulizing, which is when you feel it real, the kind of things you would like to experience, but you're not just visualizing it, you're full body experiencing it as if it's already taken place. And
Yeah.
there's a whole lot I could talk about. I want to talk about you though.
I know, but that was really helpful.
Good. The Reinvention Formula also has an interesting chapter about the greatest showman. And the reason I'm bringing that up is most of our conversation so far has had a very spiritual side to it. And people are often surprised when I say I wrote a book on P.T. Barnum, and I go, oh, that was the huckster. Oh, he was actually a very spiritual guy who knew marketing and he knew publicity and he knew advertising, and you can learn so much from him. So I wrote this whole book on him. So I know, because you talked about it on another interview with me, that showman thing is in your book, and it's important. How have you made peace with what some people look at as a hypocrisy? How do you look at The Greatest Showman and still say, hey, I do gratitude and I talk to spirit, and I receive downloads? How do you find the balance of both of those?
And I love the synchronicities between us. I know you love P.T. Barnum is a whole chapter in my book. And for anyone that hasn't seen that movie yet, I mean, it's out of this world. It's fantastic. Great actors. It's not even really a musical. Yes, it is, but there's such a good message in there. And I don't know half as much about P.T. Barnum as you do, but what I do know is that he was a visionary and he refused to play it safe. And he loved to leave his comfort zone. And he was a risk taker and he was a trailblazer and he was a great marketer. And there's just so many quotes. Oftentimes when I see good movies, I'll take notes, because I get so much inspiration out of them. I'm always available for the nuggets. And I've seen that movie probably hundreds of times. And every time I watch it, there's another nugget. And one thing he says that reminds me of Napoleon Hill is that we're only limited by our imagination or something of the sort. In other words, if we could just think bigger, then we can play bigger, and then we can accomplish literally anything that's limitless. And basically that our comfort zone is the death sentence. I don't think he said it quite like that, but that's something that I really extracted from that film. And P.T. Barnum, he was I just love the courage, the guts. A lot of people doubted him, and he just said, I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to figure it out. And then he made that guy. Was it the little guy?
General Tom Thumb was one of the first people,
right? And people kind of laughed at him, and he was insignificant, and he turned that guy into a superstar because he saw something that nobody else did. And we can go on and on all day. There's so many messages from that movie, and I just think his story, it really resonates with me.
As big as P.T. Barnum was thinking, it's important to realize that he had his feet on the ground and his brain in the sky. I went to his gravesite, and there's a very small concrete tomb there. And on it, it says, "Not my will, but thine be done," which was his favorite quote. And I love kind of processing it, because it means you can really think like, I'm going to have the biggest circus on the planet, which is where he was going with it. And yet at the same time, if it doesn't work out, it's like, I'm going to do my best, but if thine will wants something else, then go with thine will. So there was a very spiritual drive there. You also talked about the imagination and limits. And I got to ask you, this show is called Zero Limits Living. And I always get to a point where I ask my guests, do you believe there are any limits? Because I kind of have a feeling there aren't any, but I could be wrong. So do you feel there are any limits? And if so, what are they, or how do we get around them?
Yeah, I'm not going to advocate against you, especially in this topic. I think that
good answer. That's very good.
We're either connected to the light or we're disconnected from the light. And when I say light, I mean divine source, something bigger, whatever your thing is, the universe, God. But when we're connected to it, we're available. And then the channel's open and we can receive the downloads, the gifts. We could reveal our own light and do great stuff in the world, and it's limitless. But when we find ourselves disconnected, when the ego gets the better of us, or if we're sharing for recognition or not with the right consciousness, that's when we're disconnected. And I believe when we're connected to the light, there's nothing that we can accomplish. Obviously, there are certain rules within this physical capacity. But like I said earlier, 99% of what's happening here is beyond our logic. And if we can tap into that, I think we are limitless.
I love it. That is a beautiful answer. I'm curious about your own podcast, which has become so successful, and you've been doing it for years. You're reaching out and interviewing some real movers and shakers and some notable people in different walks of life. What are a couple of things that really surprised you that you learned from them? An insight, a tip, a secret, a technique, a recipe? I don't know, but what jumps to mind? Because you've had quite a roster of greats.
Thank you. I received that. And it's cool because I like to incorporate stuff that I'm really excited about in addition to the show. So you'll see successful people from all walks of life, whether it's sports, Hollywood actors, entrepreneurs, wrestling people who I love, all people that have had a lot of success. And And one thing that I hear often is that no matter which arena they're in, they all say that they're not always motivated. And I think that surprises a lot of people that might be listening right now. Whoa, so, billionaires, these people, they're not always motivated, not even close. And they realize that motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes. And if you only wait to make moves when you're motivated, you're probably not going to make many moves, right? But if you have a system, if you have high standards and you revert back to the standards instead of being emotional about how you might feel, then you'll keep it going, you'll be consistent, and you'll achieve great things. And that's where the consistency begins to compound and so forth. And so just to reiterate, I think there's a misconception that people think high achievers are always motivated. That certainly is not the case, but they do have really high standards and they do have systems and practices in place.
I think that is one of the wisest things I've ever heard. They're not always motivated. It reminds me of a lot of people who say they want to write a book or they want to open a business or they want to be an artist and they're waiting for inspiration. I learned a long time ago, if you just act on inspiration, you could die of starvation. That some of my heroes like Jack London, who wrote The Call of the Wild, and Martin Eden and Seawolf and some of the others, he got up every day, whether he was inspired or not, and he wrote 1,000 words every morning. And I've heard people like Stephen King, who of course is a legend. He says he writes every day, I think, except his birthday and Christmas. Outside of that, he's writing every day. So they're not waiting for inspiration. They're not waiting for motivation. I think this is a priceless insight. Give me another one that you've learned from anybody at any time from your show.
In regards to achieving something great, it's never a smooth ride. There's always ups and downs. There's always peaks and valleys. There's always obstacles to overcome. And I think that if you don't have resilience, you'll never be able to overcome the inevitable setbacks and obstacles and so forth. Think about you and your story and so forth. And so how do you build resilience? I think you build it by continuing to get up and step into the unknown, even if you don't necessarily have all the confidence and so forth. And when you get knocked down on your butt, you get back up, and you're always taking that with you, whatever it is that you learn. And again, spoiler alert, like, yes, with all the manifesting and the stuff that you and I really practice tap into, it doesn't always have to be so hard life, and we can make things happen for sure. But let's be real. Also, life can be tough at times. That's just inevitable, especially if you're really going for it and taking some big swings. And so a lot of the greats, they're resilient and they don't always love getting knocked down, but they understand that it's a part of the process. And if you don't react and tap into that victim consciousness, which a lot of people do, often what you'll see is the seas will begin to part and somehow some magic will happen after that.
That's a beautiful answer. Well, we're going to be running out of time, which is very irritating to me. And because I have so many more questions that I'm enjoying talking to you, and I look forward to hanging out with you in person at some point. What I'm curious to know is, knowing that I was going to interview you, were you hoping I would ask a particular question? Were you itching going, oh, I really want him to ask this because that'll give me a chance to whatever?
Yeah.
Did you have a question? No?
No. I was going to say, what I was looking forward to most is when you and I connect, we go really deep and we talk about the good stuff, the stuff that really moves the needle. And when we're able to connect like this, it's like a collective consciousness. And I think that this deep dialogue, you ask great questions, it's outside the box. I think this is really the stuff that people can grasp and change their life. It's more important, in my opinion, than strategies and tactics, if people are really available to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think downloads come from?
Source, divine, God. And I think that it's within all of us. And here's a big misconception. I think a lot of people think that some people have more potential than others. What I've come to believe, in my opinion, is that we all have the same amount of capacity to tap into. A lot of people are so disconnected from light with each decision every single day, whether it's caving to the ego or a victim consciousness. As a result, they're putting a veil over their light. So in other words, every time we do that and we act out of ego or we're looking for recognition, we're not actually dimming our actual light, but we are concealing it. But then every time we do connect and we make the right decisions and we tap into a higher consciousness and we resist the ego and we share with no agenda, we remove a veil over our light and we can shine a little brighter. And as we reveal more light, that's when we're available for those downloads because we're more connected and so forth. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I think God. I'd love to ask you what you think.
Oh, that's a great question. I go back and forth depending on what audience I talk to, because I'll know they'll use a different word and I'll try to create rapport by saying, oh, that's the God audience. So I'll say it's God. But there'll be a new agey audience and I'll go, well, that's, the cosmos or source. I actually like Napoleon Hill's term from Think and Grow Rich when he called it infinite intelligence. I think that was one of the most genius level things he ever came up with, because he was able to talk about spirituality without saying spirituality, and able to talk about God without saying God, by coming up with this phrase that sounded like infinite intelligence was more important than an ego. And you can tap into it. So for now, that is my working phrase, infinite intelligence. I want to ask another question before we run out, and that is, somebody watching, somebody listening, they're excited and they want to tap in. How do they tap into infinite intelligence, or how do they plug in, to use that analogy of the light? How do they reconnect the light?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would invite the listeners to start connecting to the 99% or to the spiritual world, as opposed to the 1% physical world. And that means that if you do agree that there's something bigger happening here, and there's a lot more happening that's beyond our logic, if you agree, then test it out and tap into that. And you'll start to see the miracles will happen. The opportunities will come. You'll get the right thought at the right time, the downloads. You'll meet the right person. But there is a system and there are universal laws and rules. So every time the opponent or the ego pops up, and if you cave, then again, you're putting another veil over your light and you're going to be disconnected. So understanding some of the concepts that we spoke about today, sharing without an agenda, utilizing restriction, not giving in to temptation, and doing the right stuff, and you tap in, that's when you'll start to see the miracles begin to happen. And don't take my word for it. I encourage everybody to test it out.
So many more questions just jumped into my mind.
Bring it.
One of them being, can you do it by yourself? Somebody is watching or listening, can they do this reconnect, plugging in by themselves, or should they get, for speed's sake, a coach or a mentor, or get into a mastermind, or join a group like yours, which you can talk about if you like? Can they do it alone?
That's a great question. I would say it's always better to have counsel, a coach, a mentor, a community, a mastermind. Typically people that are a little bit further ahead, right? Mm-hmm. So you can find out their wisdom, you could tap in, you can eliminate the inevitable setbacks, or maybe someone has already paid the dummy taxes, so to speak. You should absolutely, if you have the means, work with somebody that can help you get you there. And also now it's like, I look for a coach in anything that I want to improve upon. Yeah. It collapses time. We're not going to be here forever, at least in this physical carnation. Can you do it yourself? If you're just listening to this episode, can you take the consciousness that we spoke about and start to apply it? Yes, you can. But if you want to be a lot more efficient and obviously learn a lot more than a 50-minute conversation, then you should definitely find someone that's a little bit further ahead in the wisdom that you like to consume and go deeper.
Yeah, great answer. Well, where do you want people to go? Your book, The Reinvention Formula, I take it, is on Amazon. That's where I found it, but you may have it other places, and your website and your podcast and good things like that.
Yeah. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, the CLS Experience. We have great guests on like Dr. Joe. Anywhere you buy books, The Reinvention Formula. Anywhere on social media, at Craig Siegel _CLS. We have our community, the CLS membership, that's growing rapidly, which you've been a speaker in. And if you like inspirational text throughout the week, that's totally free. You could join our texting community by texting 917-634-3796 and text the words Dr. Joe so that I know that you heard it here.
Very good. All right. Any last words?
Just love you. Thank you for all the work that you've done and you continue to do. You make a huge impact on me. And the stuff that you talk about is very, very, very important. And it's the good stuff. And I just always love when you and I connect. And I know it's just the beginning. I can't wait to hang out with you in person.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the honor of having you here and sharing so much. I've been talking to Craig Siegel, author of The Reinvention Formula. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. This is Zero Limits Living. Every week, I bring you inspiration and information to help you transform your life. I'm putting all the shows in one place. Go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. Check out my coaching program, miraclescoaching.com. Check out my latest book, Unexpected Kindness, at unexpectedkindnessbook.com. My next book will be Zero Limits Living. It'll be out in July of 2024. I want to thank Lux Media Studios, Candace Barr, Nick running the cameras today, and all of you for tuning in. You're the ones who are plugging in and lighting up the planet. I love you all. Expect miracles. Thanks.